Hey everyone, how's it going? So I thought that I would stop in and do another Friday Reads. So to start with, I thought that I would wrap up the book that I finished this week, and that is a book that I talked about in my last Friday Reads, and that is The God of Small Things by Arundhati Roy. This was absolutely beautiful. The ending is extremely tragic, but I think extremely beautiful. The book, I think, builds momentum as it goes, really, for me. And so the ending was it just really packs a punch, the ending. And it's a really sad ending, but it has a lot to say, and it's a transcendent ending as well. So it's one of those books that's tragic, but you also take a certain joy in it. I don't know. I always find it interesting the way that we kind of take joy in the beauty of tragic things, tragic books at least. And this was kind of one of those things for me where the story is very tragic, but I still sort of took a certain joy in just the beauty with which it was conveyed, and appreciated the themes that were explored. So a lot of the themes that are explored here are about the position of women in India and the marginalization of women, but also the enduring effects of casteism, as it's called. There is one character in particular who is a Dalit, as the term is now, although formerly it was more common to refer to them as untouchables, who are people who are sort of outside of the caste system and so are very oppressed and ostracized and usually very poor and poorly educated. And the novel explores that a lot. And I feel like those social issues are very much explored with a touch for the human characters in the story. And another thing about this novel that I really love is that it's also actually very funny. It's not exactly the laugh out loud variety of humor, and I'm going to return to that in a minute when I talk about another book that I'm working on right now. It's not exactly the laugh out loud variety of humor, but I mean, one of the two protagonists, who are these young kids, these young twins, one of these two protagonists, who's named Esta, really loves Elvis. And for a huge portion of the novel, he goes by the title Ambassador Elvis Pelvis, which I thought was pretty funny. And Rahel has her own name as well, but I didn't find it quite as amusing. But it is a very funny book as well, and I do love it when an author can combine the tragic with the comic. So this was great. I highly recommend it. Again, if there's anyone out there who has read it and wants to talk about it, then let me know in the comments and we can chat about it. But I really loved it. So yeah, very glad I finally got to that. And then speaking of authors who can do comedy but also tragedy, I am also currently exactly in the middle of rereading Samuel Beckett's novel Murphy. So I began this on Monday after finishing The God of Small Things, and this is my second time reading reading this novel Murphy. It is, I believe, Samuel Beckett's second published work of fiction. His first published work of fiction was a short story collection called More Pricks Than Kicks, which I have not actually read, but I hope to. I am hoping this year still to read through most of Samuel Beckett's major works, including rereading a lot of what I have previously read. So hopefully this year I will get to More Pricks Than Kicks. But this is a reread. This is my second time reading Murphy. I read it the first time a couple of years ago, and it did not leave a huge impression on me when I read it then, really. I had forgotten a lot of what happened in it. I don't remember being super struck by it, by the prose or the characters or anything. But this time around, I am just really loving it. I'm just enjoying it so much. Now, what it's about, it has a rather simple story, but also a very strange story, as per usual with Samuel Beckett. So this takes place mostly in London, but also partly in Dublin, Ireland. And the main character, who's named Murphy, is this guy who, rather than actually, make a living or live his life at all, he would primarily like to spend his time sitting in a chair trying to become basically a disembodied mind, and would like to leave behind his physical body. Or at least that's the sense I get. So, it's a strange book, right? When you have a protagonist who you can describe in that way, it's a very strange novel, and it is, as most of Beckett's fiction and plays are. But this novel is dense at times. It works with a lot of philosophical concepts, not the least of which is that sort of mind-body problem that Descartes deals with a lot, René Descartes. But it is also just intensely funny. Again, not exactly the laugh-out-loud kind of funny, but the kind of funny where when you read it, you're like, oh, I get that's a joke. And then when you tell it to someone else, then it sounds funny. That's kind of the humor you get in Beckett's fiction, where like when you're reading it, you're not exactly laughing out loud, but if you were to tell someone about what you just read, they would probably find it funny, laugh out loud funny. For example, there is a very short scene in this novel where Murphy has been out and about for a while. He's been forced to go out and about and walk around London a little bit because he's supposed to be looking for his job, as his sort of girlfriend demands that he does, even though he doesn't want to. So he's been out and about London all day, and he's just craving to sit down, because that's what he loves doing, right? And he's just craving the feeling of sitting down. And so he decides to go for lunch somewhere, but Samuel Beckett takes like 3 whole sentences just to describe the pleasure that Murphy gets from seating his buttocks in a chair, just to describe how much pleasure he gets from the feeling of, his butt cheeks falling into a chair. And he loves it so much that he actually gets back up and sits down again, just so that he can feel it again. So you get that. You also get just these really witty remarks that are kind of nested within the prose. It's really a delightful reading experience. It might not be quite Samuel Beckett's best. It's not How It Is. It's not Waiting for Godot. But it is really good, and so I'm really glad that I'm rereading it, because again, the first time I read it, it did not really strike me as tremendously notable, but I'm just developing a new appreciation for it. So this is great. You can see I have a lot of tabs in this, and that's just because there are so many great sentences in it. So many great humorous sentences, but also just funny turns of phrases as well. And so I've been getting a kick out of this novel. Not to pun on more pricks than kicks. But anyway, yeah. So that's the fiction I've been working on. I have also continued to work on Henry David Thoreau, A Life by Laura Dassow Walls. This continues to be fabulous. Thoreau, I think he'll be perpetually relevant in his ideas. What's interesting about him is that he's well known for his ideas about civil disobedience, his ideas on abolitionism, his ideas on ecology and environmentalism. But I think what this book does well is that it does a great job of showing that those 3 big strands in his writing, the ecology, the abolitionism, and the civil disobedience, are all tightly connected. We don't usually think of ecology or environmentalism as being connected with social issues, as with, the oppression of people of color in this country, or with, big government and unjust laws, whether they pertain to race or not. But for him, they were all interconnected. The sort of structure that he saw in the natural world was something that he wanted to be reflected in human society, but that he saw wasn't, because of all of these unjust laws and slavery and other things. And I think that that's a great piece in this book, is it shows that these issues are not disconnected. And I've read and listened to other people kind of point out that environmentalism, feminism, anti-racism, policies to help the socioeconomically disadvantaged, all these things are not separate. They're all kind of a part of the same thing. And I think that's a really important and interesting insight. And that comes out in this book. But there's many other things that come out in the book, but if I tried to touch on all of them, I'd be here forever. But this is just fabulous. It's so well written, again. So I think maybe we'll finish it in another week or so. I'm buddy reading it with Patrice Jones. I think we'll finish it in a week or so, but we will see. So then, I also wanted to just talk about some books that I'm considering reading, because TBRs are fun, although setting a hard TBR is a little bit of pressure for me. But there are a couple of events that are going on this month that I'm very attracted to and that I would like to participate in. But given everything that I'm already reading and want to read, I'm just not 100% certain how much I can commit to participating in them. And they've already been going on for like a week because they both started in June. And I, of course, haven't mentioned them because I didn't make a video until like the 1st of June. But anyway, the first of those two events that I am interested in is Ancients-a-thon. And I will leave links to the hosts for that event in the description. I believe it is Jennifer Brooks, Tori from Hufflepuff Discovery, and David Wiley. But I'll leave links to their announcement videos in the description. But there is one thing that I know I will be reading for Ancients-a-thon. And for those who don't know Ancients-a-thon, it is a reading event where you just read works of literature that were published before 1700. So it's kind of to try and get people to read these older books, right? And so I will be reading at least one thing for that, and that is 2 plays by Aristophanes. So throughout this year, I am buddy reading the entirety of the surviving plays of Aristophanes, the comic Greek playwright, and I'm buddy reading them with Elena Macredina, who sometimes makes videos still. And we're trying to read approximately 1 play per month, but one previous month in the year, we fell behind and didn't read a play. So this month, we're actually doubling up and reading 2 plays. And they're very short, so I don't have many concerns about getting to them. But the 2 plays that we are reading are called Plutus and Thesmophoriazusae. And I do not know if I'm pronouncing that one correctly, but I practiced pronouncing it in preparation for this video. So I will be reading 2 plays by Aristophanes for Ancients-a-thon at the very least. But the other big thing that I'm hoping I can get to, and it kind of fits in with my reading of Beckett. I just almost gave away what the book is, but it kind of fits in with my reading of Beckett. And what I think I might try to get to is actually Dante's Purgatorio, not the entire Divine Comedy, which is what I'm holding up, but the Purgatorio, the second section in his 3-part epic, the Divine Comedy. I reread the Inferno on its own early last year, and I thought that I would reread the other 2 sections of the comedy throughout that year, but didn't get to it. So I would like to read Purgatorio this year, and then maybe next year I'll read Paradiso. This will be my 3rd time reading it. And, I mean, I love the Divine Comedy. It's one of my favorite works of literature. And so I think it's actually kind of nice that I'm giving myself the chance to devote a lot of attention to just one section at a time of it, rather than plowing my way through the entire thing at once. So I hope I can read Purgatorio. It's not super long, right? And it's a reread, and rereads do tend to be a little bit less taxing, right? Because you sort of already know what's going on. But again, it's not a short book, right? The Purgatorio. But I'm hoping maybe I can squeeze it in. And the reason that this connects actually very well with the Beckett reading is that Beckett, for one thing, Beckett was a gigantic fan of the Divine Comedy. I believe the Divine Comedy was his favorite book. But also, the Purgatorio in particular is relevant to Beckett because there is a character in the Purgatorio who Beckett references a lot, and the character is named Belacqua. And he's this guy who I think isn't even officially in Purgatorio proper in the Purgatorio, but basically he's a guy who's just too lazy to scale Mount Purgatory. You know, he could put in the work to get up Mount Purgatory, right? But he doesn't because he's just lazy, right? So he can't get to paradise because he's just lazy. And Beckett loved to reference Belacqua, and he's actually discussed explicitly in Murphy and in other Beckett works. And so the connection to Beckett is very strong, with the Purgatorio in particular. So anyway, that's the other book I hope I can get to for Ancient Salon. Again, we will see. And then the other event that I would like to participate in is June on the Range. And I've known about this event for so long, so you would think I could have planned for it better. But this event I know is hosted by Sean D. Standfast, primarily. But I will go and look up who else is hosting it and leave links to their announcement videos if they have them in the description. But I think it's the brainchild of Sean D. Standfast. And so this is a June event where you read Westerns, basically. And actually, I'm planning to watch a Western film today. After I shut off the camera, I'm going to watch Rio Bravo, the Western directed by Howard Hawks, which I'm really excited to watch. I haven't ever watched any Howard Hawks, and this movie kind of sounds intriguing, and I really like John Wayne as well. And I enjoy Westerns, so I'll be watching a movie, at the very least. But two books that I kind of have my eyes on for June on the Range. The first one, and primary one, is True Grit by Charles Portis. I have seen both film adaptations of this book, so I know the story relatively well, but I've never read the book, and I've heard it's excellent. So that's one, and I mean, it's short, and the margins are rather generous in this edition, so I don't think it would be hard to get through. But again, with everything else that's here and that I'm already working on, it's hard to say. But this is one, and obviously that fits very well. The other book that I think could fit in June on the Range is one that I think might be a bit of a stretch, but it's a book that I've had on my mind lately as one that I want to read, and that is The Roundhouse by Louise Erdrich. So this isn't exactly a conventional Western, right? It's not about cowboys or something, but it takes place in North Dakota. It's about an indigenous woman who gets kidnapped, and I believe it's about her son trying to find her or find out what happened to her. And again, it takes place in North Dakota. So I get the sense that even if it isn't a conventional Western, that it is something of a neo-Western, maybe? And I don't know, maybe Louise Erdrich will play around with sort of Western conventions, but I don't know. But it seems like it might be kind of a stretch, but I feel like it might kind of fit. But this is mostly I'm putting on because I've just been wanting to read The Roundhouse lately because I want to get to more Louise Erdrich. So that was the other choice. So anyway, I just wanted to touch on some books that I'm considering reading for two of those events because they've been on my mind, but I haven't said anything. So anyway, that's my Friday reads. I didn't talk about William Blake because I haven't really made much progress on his work this week, but I'm still chipping away at that. But anyway, I will leave it at that. Hope you all had a good week, and hope you all have a good weekend. Let me know what you are reading, and if you have thoughts on anything that I have talked about in this video, and I will leave things at that.